And I'd come down and I'd open up the cabinet and I would just stare at the bullets. And I would just look at them. And I would wonder what it would be like. I wondered when I would finally have the guts to load a gun and pull the trigger. It dominated my thoughts for years. Definitely starting in 8th grade, definitely all the way through high school. You know, I remember writing suicide notes that were 30 pages long. It was also in 8th grade that I decided that God did not exist. Now, I had grown up Catholic, but I got to a point where I was sick of blaming God for my problems and not having Him respond at all. And so I made the decision to become an atheist. Becoming an atheist really became a badge of honor for me because it made me different from everybody else. That was a way for me to get attention. And as someone who was dealing with depression and thoughts of suicide, attention was something that I really craved. And I was fairly militant about it. I liked to engage people in conversations about it and debate them and make fun of them because they were pathetic and weak-minded. And I had settled on the age of 27. It was one of those things that I knew that I was going to die when I was 27, but I didn't know exactly why I knew. At the time, I kind of associated it with Kurt Cobain, who had just recently died at the age of 27 because of suicide. And I knew that some others like Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin had died at that age. And I just assumed it had something to do with that. Finally moved to Colorado when I was 24. And my drinking, I started drinking when I was 21. My drinking went out of control, went into overdrive at that point. My anxiety was so out of control that there was basic things, everyday things that I couldn't do. I remember being so nervous about stopping and putting gas in my car that there was times I would just run out of gas driving down the road and then have to walk there anyway. Interestingly enough, a good friend of mine, she was the same time period. She was invited to church by an acquaintance at her work. She started going to church with them, and a couple weeks later she became a Christian. Well, I was dealing with this depression, I was dealing with the anxiety, and I had this really overwhelming feeling. Every day I'd drive past this little church and feel like I needed a visit, which was really a weird thing for me because I was an atheist. And I just remember sitting in that church service the following week and feeling like the pastor was speaking directly to me, that he knew exactly what was going on in my life. I said this prayer, the first prayer in 15 years, and it was simply, God, I feel like you're telling me I'm going to die this year. I just turned 27 3 days before that. And that feeling of dying at 27 was something that had never left me over the previous 15 or so years. And God answered that prayer in a very loud way. I have no proof of this or anything else, but it seemed to me that the way He answered was audible. It was so loud and it rang in my ears. It felt like He was in the car with me. And God clearly said, you are going to die this year. And I remember it scared me. It scared me because I thought either I'm hearing voices or there is a God. And if there is a God and He is as powerful as He says He is, then He just told me I'm going to die. And as much as I've wanted that for the last 15 years, I don't know if I'm really prepared for that yet. I started hanging out with that couple quite a bit. We started a New Beginners Bible study and they started pouring into me. And it was like God just opened up something in my mind that I had never considered before. And I said, hey, do you guys remember that time that God told me I was going to die? And they said, yeah, we're pretty familiar with that story. And I said, well, He just showed me what that means. That the person I've been for 27 years is dead. And that I'm now a new creation. And it was in that moment that I broke. And it was in that moment that I made the decision to stop running. Because God grabbed my heart in that moment. I was moved and I was transformed because of what He did for me on the cross. And the fact that He sent His Son to die for me on the cross and came from resurrected from the dead and my sins were paid for. All those things meant a ton to me, but what really grabbed my heart was knowing that when I was in middle school, when I was starting on that road with a depression, and God told me I was going to die when I was 27, it meant that He was with me in that moment.
How great the love of Jesus Christ. Upon the cross of Calvary, the blood was shed that pardoned pardons me. No longer bound